Tonight I'll be talking about social innovation, but not from an insider perspective, but because, I mean, going to the UK and London to talk about social innovation, you have the Young Foundation, you have the DOT programs in your backyard, so it's not really my job here to come tonight and talk about social innovation and what it is. What I would like to do is, by detour, talk about design activism and try to uncover what I consider unexplored potential in design activism to contribute to social innovation and social design. Of course, those two branches or approaches, design activism and social innovation, I would say rely on a common ground, or common interests. If you look into the work of Björkvinsson, Ehn and Hillgren, who's theorizing about social innovation and the bridging to participatory design, it's obvious that they consider design to play a vital role in this process of radical change. The design being a driver for social change in order to develop new services, products, environments for more sustainable life forms or consumption habits. I took this quote also to start off with, because this points towards the social innovator or the social designer as an agent of change who, through actions, remodifies social structures to create a new space in society in order to cure social imbalance or other kinds of problems. I'll return to that. But these two quotes I would like to start out with because they point towards the central importance of actions and design actions, design activities in social innovation. And if you take action also to understand what actions is, it's interesting if you ask a sociologist what an action is, he will always see it in relation to structures. It's two sides of a coin. So actions and agency have to do with the freedom of the individual to act independently of the constraining structures of society. In my work, I've been primarily interested in researching on how structures are embedded in the urban environment, in public spaces, how these structures constrain the unfolding of people's everyday life, and then on the other hand, how design activism can be used to disrupt these structures so that you sort of give the freedom back to individuals and people at street level so that they can take the spoon in their own hands and do something about the social problems that they face in their everyday life. I think talking about structures and structures being enablers for activities and events in cities may sound a bit weird. I mean, you're probably all familiar with this book. For the last 10 years, 12 years or so, this book has been, or the thoughts of Richard Florida has been so influential in the development of what we today call the creative city. And the creative city, you should think, is a mecca of activities, of actions, local actions, artistic events. A lot of these local actions that we sort of think would be important for social change. But I have to admit that I'm a bit skeptical towards the ideas of Richard Florida. And I'll explain why to you. But before I do that, I think it's just important to have the backdrop for understanding the visions that he introduces in this book. Richard Florida had a specific city in mind when he was writing The Creative Class. At that time in the 80s, he was living in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh was experiencing a tremendous crisis in the steel industry and also a recession in the economy. And you could say it's a bit similar to the crisis that we stand in today, with the result of a lot of people losing their jobs. Over 150,000 people were losing their jobs in Pittsburgh. So a lot of economists and sociologists were grouping together to find a cure for this, you could say, crisis in the post-industrial society. And they came up with this idea of the triple helix. as a new model for research and development. If you merge political power, you take industry and you take research institutions, and you make very good conditions for these three sectors to collaborate. That would ensure, Florida thought, a growth in development of IT and media industries. And they were testing this out. One of the first places was at the Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. And by using this model, they sort of created a productive environment for these startup companies that are listed here. And I think you guys are familiar with most of them. Google, Pixar, Lycas. We know those companies today, and they were quite successful. Now this sort of told Florida and his team that by investing a lot of economy and money into the IT and media sector, you could create a creative economy, and that would cure the dilemmas of the post-industrial society. So the creative city had this new creative class depending on, I think, designers, software developers, computer scientists, in order to create a whole new service and products. But the problem was at this time that there was almost nobody wanted to live in Pittsburgh anymore. It was such a disaster to live there. So a lot of people sort of escaped the city. So they had to find ways to bring in the city, into the city again, these people to work in the media and IT industries. So Florida came up with the idea that the creative city should be a place offering a wide range of cultural activities and events, art fairs, festivals, sports competitions. And in so doing, they could use culture as a competitive element to attract a labor force to come and work in this IT sector. Now I have a bit of some reservations about this model, about the creative economy and the creative city. First of all, it turns culture and art and creativity into a commodity, into something that they ask citizens to consume. If you see it in a lot of cities today, there's a lot of people living on the margin of society who can't afford to go into the inner centers of the city in order to get these cultural experiences. They simply can't afford it. So the model is also very socially exclusive. It's only meant for a particular group of society to have the luxuries and the experience of the creative city. And then the last but not least, it is of course, I think, too tied up with ideals of economic growth and innovation. And why is this a problem? I mean, look at Spain and Greece, Portugal. I think a lot of us have serious doubts that the economy and consumption is going to save us from the economical and financial crisis that we're standing in today. And actually, I don't think I'm standing alone with this viewpoint. If you look, this is a photo taken a couple of years ago of Monsieur le Président Sarkozy and the Bundeskanzler Merkel. They're coming out from a meeting here at the EC. They're trying to solve the crisis, and you can see their faces is not really going that good. Compare that to the self-confidence with which Florida. I think we must ask ourselves, is this really what we want to do? Is the creative city holding the solution to the post-industrial society? Believe me, we tried it in Denmark. We tried the creative city in Denmark. The problem in Denmark, you have at the west coast of Jutland, you had a lot of fishing industries and old factories closing down because production is outsourced to Asia. So economy has stopped out there. Growth has stopped. In the media, this area of the country is called the rotten banana. It has the shape of a rotten banana. And if you superimpose that onto Denmark, this is where we really have some serious troubles in our economy. Mayors out there try to build exhibition centers and, follow the advice of Richard Florida that you should just use culture to get some labor force in there. It didn't work. You know, having an aquarium, looking at the fish from the North Sea, it's not like you're creating a big Bilbao effect. Also, it's only, I mean, the model is not entirely a failure. It works for big cities like Copenhagen and Aarhus and Aalborg. They have universities and IT sectors that benefit from this model, but for the rest of the country, we have to come up with new ideas. And one of my big inspirations is Charles Laundrie's notion of the creative city. This was introduced already as early as in the 70s. And if you look at how he defines the creative city, I pay attention to the midsection quote. He looks upon people not as consumers, but as human beings. Even ordinary people, not only a specific creative class, but ordinary people are very creative. They can make the extraordinary happen. And he sort of positions and envisions a new city and a new role for design also in this city to address the problems that people have, the social problems and all that. So I was thinking, could I sort of come up with an example of how design could sort of address these intractable urban problems to get an idea of what it actually means and what is the new role of design. And so I started to think about a project that I saw in a Canadian Centre of Architecture some years ago by Sarah Ross. I suppose that you thought that what you looked upon at the left image was a bench. It's not a bench. This is an urban imperative. This is a structure in the urban landscape. It's materialized into the public furniture. It's an order by the authorities. It says, don't lie down on me. And, you know, I'm told that this is because we don't want the homeless people to lie on the benches and, you know, disturb the public order and all that. But I just can't figure out if there's a homeless person lying down on the bench, they're not really disturbing the public order. They're quite peaceful and calm. Also, I think the public space is for everyone, so not having any debate at all about if this is the kind of qualities that we want to have in our urban landscapes is wrong, I think. And I think Sarah Ross, by designing what she calls the archisuits, is making us aware of these structures. But these suits are created so that they can modify the urban imperatives. They can go against power. They can remodify the structures and enable the unfolding of some activity that was certainly not meant to be there. And she's created a whole series, as you can see from this catwalk. Very nice pieces, variables that you can use to make hostile environments more friendly, more comfortable. Not only have like power deciding how to behave in urban space. And so this is what, in my research, I have tried to uncover or to look more carefully into. How is it that design can be used as a disruptive practice to modify or remodify a structure, a power structure, a politically motivated structure, but also to give the power to the people and actually make them able to take actions and to fulfill their wishes or dreams or needs in order to create more sustainable life forms. And this has made sense for me to have this triangle as a diagram for understanding where the research literature is positioning itself when we have to understand the disruptive character of design. There's a lot of literature out there modeling design activism according to political theories. There's also a lot of art historians and art theories coming in, also telling us about the techniques that design activists use. But in my work, I've tried to ask, what is the specific design component? What is it that makes it design activism and not art activism or political activism? So I've I'm trying to give you some examples of why it's useful, perhaps, to have a notion of design activism and not just reducing it to the two closely related sister arts. I'll give you some examples here. Anne Thorpe, who actually just have a new book out, a couple of years ago, she created a framework to understand design activism and the disruptive character of design activism according to sociological political theories. So she looked into a vast amount of projects, and she was able to deduce 6 categories which she considered was defining design activism. And I thought, hey, that's great. That can make me understand what is the specific designerly component of this practice. And I thought of one of my heroes. This is Ricardo Dominguez. He's a professor at Berkeley. He's a professor in what's called civic electronic disobedience. That means that he gets paid by the US taxpayers to use electronic media to break the law. I mean, only few of us can dream of having such a position. Now, as you can see, he has a half Mexican background. He realized that a lot of his fellow countrymen from Mexico was trying to escape the crime, terrible crime, and related to drugs and also the cartels in Mexico, escaping from Mexico to the US, to the land of opportunity, to get a new life. Unfortunately, a lot of these people never made it, because whenever they got out in the desert, it was so hot that they sort of lost orientation, and they couldn't find the shelters that was put out for them, nor the water tanks and all that, so they actually tragically died out there. So he thought, well, how can I, as a professor with a responsibility to do something, change this reality? And he thought, well, you have this cell phone, this Motorola cell phone. It's one of the cheapest at the market. I can create an app for this cell phone. Then these people they can afford it. And this app, he calls it the Transporter Integration Tool. This app makes them able to find the shelters and the water tanks. Not only that, it also enables them to take the aesthetically most pleasing way through the desert. And when they actually succeed to get to the US, they're celebrated with a poem, a haiku poem, welcoming them to their new country. As you can see, I'm quite fascinated with this project, and I thought, well, now I have all the 6 boxes. I just need to put it into one of Anne Thorpe's boxes, and then I understand how come this is design activism. And then I started to demonstrate an artifact. It reveals a positive alternative that are superior to the status quo. Most certainly. Check. I went on an act of communication, making information visual, devising rating systems, creating maps, and so yeah, it does that too. Check. It's also, you could say, well, it doesn't live up to the 3rd category. It's not a conventional political act. It's not proposing a new law, but it raises some questions concerning the existing laws of immigration. Well, they also qualify for that. It's also a service artifact. It certainly helps these people. Well, I think you could say it doesn't live up to number 5, but it lives up to number 6. It's a process artifact. It makes us aware that why are these people actually trying to escape Mexico? Well, perhaps there is a creative class in the US having some drug problems or somewhere else in the film industry that are sort of, they are depending on the drug trafficking from Mexico. So the real problem is not actually Mexico, but it's has to be found somewhere else. And also, if you look into the US economy, it actually heavily relies on illegal immigrants to do all the jobs that the US citizens don't want to do. It's the same thing in Denmark. By creating this transporter integration tool, Ricardo Dominguez raises all these questions. But I wasn't so satisfied with all the 6 categories, because What theory is supposed to do is to make you able to make distinctions, separations. But here's a big melting pot, as you can see. It qualifies for everything, and then it tells you really nothing about the essence of design activism. So that made me think that, well, perhaps political theories doesn't really hold the answer to what design activism is. But actually, I went to Montreal in 2010, and I had the pleasure of attending Carl de Salvo's presentation of an early paper. He also uses political theory from the Clou and Move. And from these authors, he takes the distinctions between politics and the political. And that was actually quite useful for my understanding of design activism. In political theory, politics refers to how we organize ideologies into parties, governments, everything that has to do with the existing democratic order. The political, on the other hand, is not organized. It's an unstable precondition for democracy. It's where disagreement occurs. It's where sort of meanings or the public debates are thrown out in public space and actually disturb the political system. Now, Carl de Salvo uses these two categories to distinguish between two forms of design activism. One of them, he says, is design for politics. And I thought a good example of that would be, you remember the US presidential election in 2000, which was finally decided in the Supreme Court because there was some uncertainty of a segment of voters. And the whole thing came down to design failure. You had these trump cards, and it actually, it indicates that all the Democratic voters who wanted to chunk the card to vote for Al Gore, they put the card into hole number 2, but by doing so they actually voted for the Reform Party. So there was a lot of Democratic voters losing their votes. Now that's, of course, what came out of that was a disaster. So a designer working to improve the balance here in the chunk card, that would be an example of design for politics. It tries to improve the processes of the political system. Turning to the second category, because that is the one I'm finding the most interesting, is the political design, and Carl de Salvo uses this as an example in his article. It's a project from Columbia University where there was a group of data designers taking crime statistics. What you usually do in this area, you take crime statistics for where the crime occurs, and that you make some statistic and knowledge from. But these designers turned the data set on its head, so they were starting to visualize where the prison inmates came from. And they were able to show that you can actually take a large majority of US prisoners coming from single building blocks in 5 US cities, where the US government spent an excess of money to keep them away from crime. And over 50% of these people are actually re-incarcerated within 3 years. They commute between prison and these blocks all the time. Now this project is political in the sense that it goes against the status quo. It reveals that the existing structure is wrong, and perhaps political decisions could be made otherwise. Invest money in social programs, in housing, something else. This is for the political decision makers to reveal a condition that is not so good, and the design activist here is contesting it by showing that there should be alternatives to this reality. I think this was very useful for my work, the effect of revealing a structure, making it transparent, and also the contest, the subversion of the structure was important. But what I sort of miss with de Salvo is that he's not looking so much into when design actually enters people's lives. This was made for the political decision makers. What about design activists who actually enable people themselves to take action? And so I felt that I needed something more in the theoretical framework for understanding design activism. I needed an aesthetic, material dimension because design activism is about reconfiguring urban space. It's about renegotiating the conditions for people to come together, to consume, to do all kinds of activities. So I see very much, this is an area of aesthetics, because as soon as you start to reconfigure space and time and you reconstruct public space, it's a domain for aesthetics. An example would be this project by Institute for Applied Autonomy. Now this, what you see here is a map of Manhattan. All the red squares are CCTV cameras. And you can see the density is most critical in the lower part of Manhattan, of course, at the financial Wall Street and the financial district. What this group of designers, Ted Hirsch and other people started to ask themselves is, why is it that those CCTV cameras are put up down here? Because this is not where the crime is the problem. It's up north in Harlem. That's really where you have some troubles going on the street at night without, being robbed. So if the argument for putting these cameras up is to protect the public, of the public space, it should have been otherwise. Also, there was a debate in the US because a lot of the footage from the cameras were handed over to companies. So safety will turn into a commodity. And I just don't feel that comfortable when companies are sort of taking control over that and have to earn money for safety. So they also created a little app. It was able to create the path of least surveillance down Manhattan when you had to stroll from Fifth Avenue down to Brooklyn Bridge. You can find your way through the CCTV cameras. Now this is an aesthetic potential because it reorders space-time. So, and that's why I mean that, or think that aesthetics and art theory also has a say in what design activism is. And there's a lot of people who have actually tried to understand design activism from an art theoretical perspective. One of them being Brian Holmes. He realizes that design activists today uses a lot of the techniques that artists have used like for centuries, or at least for the last century. Situationists, the avant-garde movement, what you just saw, the Institute of Applied Autonomy, is a tactical media project. It takes surveillance technology and it turns the media against itself. This has been seen a lot of times throughout art history. But the limitation is, in this view is that if you do so, you sort of reduces design activism to become an art activist approach. And obviously, design activists are using the same techniques and tactics, but they're doing it for other purposes than artists. And they're doing it with the aim of changing people's everyday life. And that's different. So there is a limitation to this, reducing design activism to this previous art movement. Another example also, which have the effect of contesting structures, you know that quite well, is Don Rayleigh's critical design. They also uses these techniques from Fluxus and Dadaism to raise questions about consumerism and how the market drives technology and all that. But yeah, this is one of the projects that you probably know. This is a robot as she's holding, and the robot, yes, it's being operated. You have to stand very still and stare into it. So you could create a sort of very emotional relationship with the robot. Of course, to raise questions about all the ideals of ease of use, and when we use robot technology, you have to be fast and stuff. This is sort of slowing down the pace, and it's raising concerns about the ideologies. But my concern with critical design is that it's very much targeted to the design community itself. And a lot of these pieces never really enters the everyday life of people. So again, I would say that there's still need of expanding the aesthetic understanding of design activism. And I've found a lot of inspiration in a French philosopher, Jacques Rancière. He sees aesthetics as a material political practice. It's two sides of the same coin. Whenever you change conditions of space-time, you are political, because you change people's abilities and possibilities to interact and experience. And he has this notion of aesthetics as a specific disruptive experience. Aesthetic objects creates ruptures. It opens up structures. And in so doing, it makes us aware that what we think is self-evident, what we usually do in our routines, is not that evident. It's politically motivated. You have a society have unwritten laws about how to behave and how to feel about how you behave. But if you have design activist projects, what they typically do is they open up a tension between doing and feeling. And one example is one Spanish architect and activist, Santiago Cirugera, who visited our school in the spring. And I think he gives a very good example of this disruptive aesthetic quality of design activism. What he's doing here is he's asking the community, how do you want to create your own space? Yeah, we would like to do a playground for our kids in front of our favorite cafe. But you're not allowed to do that stuff in the cities. You have endless bureaucratic procedures. So you have to apply for permissions to put up seesaw and stuff like that. And typically, you're rejected, because there's probably a sign up here in the street having sales for commodities, and this is not so good, having a big installation blocking your vision. But Santiago, he says, well, what is allowed in the urban space is dumpsters and containers. You can apply for dumpsters and containers, and the municipality will say, yes, now the citizens are going to clean the streets. They're doing the job for us. I put down the dumpsters on the street, he said, Thomas, and then I just transform them. I transform them to whatever people would like them to be. And there they have, for a moment of their life, a pocket of free activity, which they decide themselves, and they are no longer dictated how to feel about it. They create this new emotional values to their belonging to this space. Another example is also quite funny. He said, Thomas, I have Pepe, it's one of my good friends and other friends. I would really like to have them over for Corona on Fridays. But I need a room. My apartment is just too small. I can't have a party there on Fridays. But I just realized that I'm never going to have this permission again. Because there's probably some aesthetic concerns with the facade and the historical essence of the neighborhood. And he says, I found a much easier way. I took some spray cans and I just did some graffiti on my own facade, and I applied for a scaffold to remove it. Permission were given straight away, so I could use the scaffold to create this little extra room, and there I could have my party. I know it's not going to be there forever, but at least it gives me a new sense of being a citizen in this neighborhood. And in this sense, it's also very political. It's reacting, it's contesting, it's revealing, but it's also creating a dissensus. The dissensus is the rupture where citizens can create a new relationship between doing and belonging. And this is what Rancière says in this quote, it treats states and politics as a form of experience. So, from all this, I created this framework saying that we don't need political acts, we need categories of urban experiences. This is how we need to understand design activism in urban space. So we have, for instance, walking, dwelling, gardening and recycling, and playing. And there you have design activism being able to operate in each of these domains. But what characterizes it is these effects, these three effects at least. This is not exhaustive, of course. You can add a lot of other categories to it. but this is what I have found more meaningful for my own understanding of design activism, and then also what we have used to inform some of the projects at the school. This was an example of recycling and using recycled materials to break the law. The next example is where you use playful tactics to reclaim the streets from people driving their car or traffic taking over so much space in our cities without, again, ever questioning if this is what we really would like to have. This is actually an old, interesting example too, by Hermann Knoflacher, who made this walking tools, mobile, Gehzeug, and he made this intervention in '75, and all, of course, to just pay attention to, in all those cars behind him, there's probably also just one person sitting. They take so much space up in our cities, and everything is sort of determined to this transport vehicle. We would like, in this next project, to use play and gamification as a way to restructure that condition. And actually, I stumbled over a Dutch architect and an artist, Constijn Nieuwenhuis, who also actually talks about the creative city. That's back in the 50s and 60s. And he wanted to create a very playful city. He called it the New Babylon. And he based it on the ideas of Johan Huizinga, which was a play theoretician. And he imagined a new society where all work was taken over by full automated technology. So you can give, again, the creativity and play back to people and have them be playful every day, not only on Sunday when they walk to the art museum to have creativity be presented, but actually to do it and to perform it in their everyday lives. Typically, when you see gamification being taken out in where you use digital and IT technologies in urban space, you see examples like this where you have gamification very much in the foreground. Like this is an old, Pac-Man, the old arcade classics, which was superimposed on Washington Square. And then you had people dressed up in t-shirts and Inky and Blinky, and they were chasing each other down the streets. Now this is an example of gamification taking too much focus of attention. We would like to put gaming a bit more in the background and social interaction in the foreground, but to use it as means for enabling interactions between people, and to use it also to give power back to pedestrians. The last project that I'm going to show is made by one of our graduate students, Alexander Muckenberger, who's part of this activist collective, the Bureau de Tours, who has been working over the years to explore the boundaries of how to expand urban space and to make citizens participate in the development of the city. And he was invited to participate in this Sculptures by the Sea exhibition, which you probably know. The ambition here is to explode the art museum and to put up sculptures on the sea, and it's almost like being at the museum. You show your ticket and then you have a stroll down the beach and you see this sculpture. Now if you invite Alexander to an exhibition like this, he's just so lazy. So he says, I would like the audience themselves to make the art they would like to see. And also I would like to challenge the whole idea of the artist and all this. I would like the maker culture to appear on the beach and have that social meeting between people. And I think he really points towards some of the major challenges for design activism, because to get this to work, you have to invent a whole new society and culture, and you have to permeate it into people's life and make them able to actually do it. They do a lot of urban interventions, but it only lasts for about a month. What they hope for is that it stays and people take responsibility to do it. But this project shows how difficult it is and what a challenge design activists are up against. He created boxes, wooden boxes, and threw them into the sea, and they were coming up on the beach, and there was a lot of different items. And he would like to see how people would react to these. And this probe you're going to see, it has a Greek column here. That's the ultimate symbol of art in Western culture. It's the Greek column. So this is what two girls are finding, and I won't say more, but you can see for yourself what is happening here. Now this is a decisive moment. They're almost about to be creative. They're almost there. They really want to perform. And what happens? You have law enforcement popping up on the street, putting it all down into the box and bringing it to the police station. You can see how difficult it is. And here I would like to end my talk because this is really the crux of the matter. Thank you.
I once gave a talk in a school of architecture which I thought was getting too comfortable with its social innovation. The talk was called "Is Design Activism Bad Design and Bad Activism?" I just wondered if you had an answer to that.
Yeah, I can see the point. I think what this addresses...
Not in relation to what you showed, by the way.
No, but I think this is what we... I think this is the implication for design education that this design activism has, because it is really challenging the whole notion of design being glossy and stylish and all that. And actually it's also challenging the belief that there is a product that's the answer to a problem. So it's about, I think, reforming that kind of thinking. And probably it's bad design, probably it's also folkloristic and very do-it-yourself. But I think that sort of comes with the approach. And I also think that Bureau 2 and other activists have shown that it actually can come together and create some nice pieces too. It doesn't always end in this.
You started off by saying you wanted to explore how design actions and activism could disrupt social structures. And I do understand that these are student projects and undergraduate projects. And, but I wanted to try and understand, do you think these are disrupting effectively social structures? There are some moments here of playfulness and disruption, and you talked about the intervention of the police in that last one. But it's the sort of further impact, which means a change that is maintained in social structures. And do you I've got a second question.
I think that wide-ranging potential is probably not present in the project. But I think if you see the Santiago Cerugera, that's an example of very much reconfiguring a social structure in a city and using design activism to build a community and to have people actually develop their own part of the city and their own neighborhood.
Do these types of approaches really act as designed for social change, or are they one-off or occasional interventions that have very limited social change during the event?
I absolutely agree that a lot of the urban interventionist projects have a limited sort of time frame. They're made and then they disappear. But I think they show practices that we could perhaps organize for. One example is in Aarhus, the second largest city in Denmark. They created this old railway area. And they have turned that into an organization where people, artists and citizens, can come and use maker spaces and work with wood and metal. And that's an attempt to grow a culture and to invite people into this, to these processes. I would say the problem is that the municipalities don't know how to organize for this anarchistic initiatives.
That's the real challenge, isn't it?
And this is all my projects are seen from street level. I'm not concerned here with organizations and politicians and political decision makers. But that's also, of course, very much important to get this going and to change the model of growth that our societies are based on.
Thanks for that presentation, the ideas and examples there. I like the idea of recipes rather than toolkits, but at the same time I like the idea of these interventions being framed as prototypes for different ways of doing things, different ways of living. And if they are framed as prototypes for different ways of living, then I think it becomes more easily understood by municipalities, for example, what the potential of them are. So when you talk about the Office for Drug Users, here in the UK recently we now have chief police constables arguing for what these guys are terming offices for drug users. Have you got examples where some of the work that has been presented, I see the example you were giving there was that the power system, the police turn up and shut it down and so on. But in the UK, my experience is that's not always the case, and that there are people that are looking, that have duty for, sort of duty of care for citizens, that are looking for different ways of doing things. And so I think sort of the language and perhaps even design language and framing of prototypes can be useful there, especially with municipalities that are thinking about design thinking, design acting, and where you start with action and so on.
We have previous projects also where we used, of course, prototypes for that play that role. Also in the co-design process, we used the game prototypes, as you know, with the prison and the prison probation system, and to make dialogues not only with inmates and families, but also with the staff and the officers in the prison. So that's, I think, the crucial potential of prototypes, also spurring debate and not being products, because they don't close around this, but they open up for renegotiating roles and identities. But also making, I think what's important is to understand that sometimes power structures have a way of embedding themselves in a self-evident way, which we don't question anymore. And you start to grow habits from that. And this is what the prototypes do too, I think.
I think that what's coming out in the conversation is the stuff about participatory engagement. And you know yourself, most of the prison research shows that if you engage individuals in participation that gives them agency in this sort of thing, it changes them. So I suppose that what I see in these projects, they're very, from the point of view of design, are good fun. But perhaps the next stage is to make them participatory design processes, because if you really engage with others, then maybe it changes you. But my point is that you can't have design activism without political activism. You need to have both, or it's pointless.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's probably my age speaking.
No, but Lorraine, what I'm saying is with Angers is that it's not only a design activism, it's always political. You cannot, you will always go in and remodify political conditions. But it's on another level than if you have governmental organization here. In these cases, they address the political.
But destabilising, which is what Chris Daver argued in the 70s, was what we should be doing to change the conditions for women. It doesn't always get you very far. You have to actually have proper quality out. You need to vote.
Yeah.
Point.